Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky, one of those places where everyone knows your name, your business, and your family history 3 generations back. It was 1976, and I had just turned 17. My world revolved around school, church, and the occasional drive-in movie with my best friend Ellie. My father ran a modest hardware store on Main Street, and my mother was the type of woman who ironed pillowcases and insisted on saying grace before every meal, even at breakfast. It was a quiet, predictable life. That was until I got involved with Caleb Turner. Caleb was the son of Judge Raymond Turner, the kind of man who walked into a room and silence followed him. Everyone in town either feared or respected him. Caleb, though, wasn't like his father. He was charming in a way that made girls forget their upbringing. He had this lazy smile, sun-bleached hair, and a way of talking that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. We started seeing each other in secret that summer. I didn't tell anyone, not even Ellie, mostly because I knew what people would say, that I wasn't good enough for him. When I found out I was pregnant, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, holding a drugstore test I'd bought 2 towns over just to avoid being recognized. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Caleb was the first person I told. I was scared, sure, but part of me believed he'd take care of it, that we'd figure it out together. He didn't say much at first, just sat there staring at the floor, biting the inside of his cheek. The next day he came back and told me his family would take care of everything. I didn't know then just how literal he meant that. Within a week, everything in my life changed. My parents were told I'd had a breakdown. That's the word they used, breakdown. I was suddenly unwell, and it would be best if I stayed somewhere quiet to recover. They sent me to stay with some distant cousin of my mother's in a rundown farmhouse nearly 50 miles away. No phone, no car, no way to contact anyone. My father didn't even drive me there, Caleb's uncle did. He didn't say a word during the entire ride. I remember staring out the window the whole way, watching the trees blur past, and feeling like I was being erased. The farmhouse was old and smelled like dust and mothballs. The woman I was sent to stay with, Aunt Margaret, though I'd never met her before, was in her late 60s, wore orthopedic shoes and always kept her curtains drawn. She never asked questions, never offered comfort. Her house had no television, no radio, and the only books were religious pamphlets and an old Bible with pages so thin they crinkled when you touched them. I spent most of my days staring out the back window, watching the empty fields shift with the wind, waiting for something, anything to happen. It was like time had stopped. At night, I'd lie awake and listen to the sounds of the old house, wood creaking, wind slipping through cracks, distant coyotes. I wasn't allowed to go into town. Aunt Margaret said it was for the best. I had no idea what people back home were being told. Ellie never wrote, neither did my parents. Weeks went by, then months. My belly grew, and with it the silence around me. I felt like a ghost trapped in someone else's story. Sometimes, I'd talk to the baby just to hear my own voice. I remember whispering, "I don't know what they're doing to us, but I promise I'll get you out." Then one morning, I heard voices outside. I peeked through the front window and saw Judge Turner's black Buick parked in the dirt driveway, dust still swirling around the tires. He didn't come in. Instead, he spoke with Aunt Margaret on the porch, low and calm. She kept nodding, eyes fixed on the ground. After he left, she brought me a suitcase and said I needed to pack. They found a better place, she said. No details, no answers. I asked where we were going. She didn't answer, just pointed to the suitcase and walked out of the room. That night I didn't sleep. I kept thinking, what if I disappeared completely? The next day, Caleb showed up. It was the first time I'd seen him in months. He looked thinner, paler, like he hadn't been sleeping either, but he wouldn't look me in the eye. He just stood by the door while Aunt Margaret handed him the suitcase. Then he muttered something about a clinic in Ohio and that they would pay for everything. I told him I didn't want to go anywhere. I begged him to tell my parents the truth. That's when he finally snapped. Said it was too late for all that things had already been handled. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but the way he said it chilled me to the bone. I didn't go to the clinic. That night, while Aunt Margaret was asleep, I grabbed the suitcase she packed for me and snuck out the back door. I walked for what felt like hours, following the road with nothing but the moonlight and the sound of gravel crunching under my shoes. Eventually, I found a gas station with a payphone. I had no money, but the clerk, this skinny kid with long hair and a kind face, let me make a call. I dialed the only number I could remember by heart, Ellie's. When she picked up, I barely got the words out. All I said was, "It's me. I need help." Ellie showed up 6 hours later, driving her brother's beat-up Chevy Nova. When she saw me, she burst into tears. She told me everyone thought I'd been committed to some private facility out west, that my parents had been told not to visit, and that I'd asked for space. Caleb apparently had gone back to school like nothing happened. I stayed with Ellie and her family for a few weeks, hidden in the basement. Her parents were quiet about it, but I could tell they knew something wasn't right. They never asked questions. They just let me stay. Eventually, I found a women's shelter in Louisville that helped girls like me. I gave birth there, to a little girl with a head full of dark hair. I named her Hope. It wasn't until years later that I found out the full story. One of Caleb's cousins, drunk at a wedding, told someone what had really happened, how the Turners had fabricated a mental breakdown, falsified medical papers, and even paid off a doctor to back it all up. They'd planned to handle it quietly, send me away, give the baby up without my consent, and pretend I never existed. I was just a liability to them, an inconvenience. I never saw Caleb again. Last I heard, he became a lawyer like his father. I changed my name, moved out of Kentucky, and raised Hope on my own. She's in college now, smart, strong, and full of fire. She doesn't know the whole story yet. One day I'll tell her, but not because I want her to feel sorry for me. I'll tell her so she knows how far some people will go to protect power, and how far you have to go to protect yourself. To this day, there are folks back in that town who still think I had some kind of breakdown. Maybe that's for the best. Let them think I disappeared. The truth is, I survived. I'm not a superstitious person. I don't believe in ghosts, witches, or backwoods cults. Or at least I didn't. I'm 28. I live alone in a rental house in Jackson, Mississippi. And until a few weeks ago, my biggest worries were rent and a weird noise my car makes in reverse. I like hiking on weekends, mostly to clear my head. A few friends and I, all people I've known since college, planned a trip out to a wooded area about an hour and a half east of Jackson. It's public land, not marked as anything special, just quiet and remote. It was me, Jordan, Will, and Rachel. Nothing fancy, just a day hike with snacks, photos, and no cell service. I wish we'd turned around the second we saw that first cross. We'd wandered off trail, which we tend to do when the marked paths get boring. That's when Rachel noticed what looked like an animal's skull nailed to a tree. At first, we thought it was part of someone's weird hunting ritual or some kind of southern folk art. But then, we started noticing more things. Dozens of handmade wooden crosses stuck crooked into the ground. Strips of dirty clothing tied to low-hanging branches. Some items were really old, almost rotted. There were little cloth dolls, too, and what looked like melted candles stuck in the dirt. The whole area had this heavy, quiet feel to it, like the trees were pressing in. We didn't say it out loud, but we were all creeped out. I took a bunch of photos, close-ups of the crosses, the bones, even a hoodie that looked like it had dried blood on it. Will told me to knock it off, but I didn't think much of it. I figured I'd post them later on a hiking subreddit, maybe as one of those found something weird in the woods type of threads. None of us were brave enough to go any deeper into the grove. There was a tree in the center, thicker, older, covered in what looked like carvings and more bones nailed into the bark. We all just stood there, staring at it. Then Jordan said, "We should go, now." And without another word, we left. That should have been the end of it. But that night after I got home, I posted 3 of the photos online. Nothing identifying, just the objects, nothing with people or locations. A few hours later, after midnight, I got the first text. No words, just a photo. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was my driveway, taken from across the street. My car was in it, and the porch light was on. That photo had been taken minutes before I saw it. I looked outside immediately. Nothing, just darkness and silence. I didn't sleep that night. Every time a car passed or a branch moved outside, I'd get up and check the windows. I even turned off all the lights and sat on the couch with my phone in hand, waiting. Nothing else happened until 3:12 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was staring at the clock when the next text came through. Another photo. This time it was closer. My front window. You could see the curtain half drawn, and behind it, the soft glow of my TV. I was in that room when it was taken. My stomach dropped. I ran to the window and flung it open, yelling into the night, but there was no one there. I checked every lock in the house twice. The next morning I called Jordan. I didn't want to sound paranoid, so I just asked if he'd noticed anything weird since the hike. He hesitated. Then he said he'd gotten a message too, but his was just a blank screen. No image, no text. Rachel and Will hadn't gotten anything, at least not yet. We all felt uneasy, like maybe we'd wandered into something we weren't supposed to see. I deleted the post and the photos immediately, but it felt too late. That day, I installed a security camera above my door, even though I live in a decent neighborhood. It didn't make me feel any safer. That night, I didn't get a text. I thought maybe it was over. But in the morning, when I checked the footage from the camera, there was a person. At 2:47 a.m., someone walked up to my front steps and just stood there for nearly 5 minutes. They never knocked, never rang the bell, just stood there. The footage was grainy, but I could see a hood, dark jeans, and what looked like something hanging from their neck, maybe a necklace or a bone. At one point, they turned and looked straight at the camera, but their face was completely obscured by shadow. I called the police, showed them the footage. They took a report, but nothing ever came of it. By the end of that week, Rachel texted us saying her cat had gone missing. She was crying on the phone, said she found her back door open that morning, but she always locks it. She lives alone too, and now she won't stay in the house without her brother over. Will hasn't said much since. He's not the type to show emotion, but he looked shaken last time we talked. He said he's been hearing things at night, branches breaking, soft knocking. We all agree on one thing. Whatever that place was, we shouldn't have touched it, shouldn't have photographed it, and we definitely shouldn't have posted it online. I started keeping the lights on at night, even in rooms I wasn't using. I felt watched, constantly. Every time I took out the trash or went to my car, I'd feel like someone was just out of view. The texts didn't stop, but they changed. No more photos, just single words. Repent. Return. Watch. Sometimes, nothing at all. Just the sound of the notification at 2 or 3 in the morning. I stopped opening them. I changed my number, but it didn't matter. The messages kept coming from random, untraceable numbers. It was like they weren't meant to be replied to, just reminders that someone was still out there. A few days later, I came home to find something nailed to the tree in my backyard. It was a small, crude wooden cross with what looked like feathers and string wrapped around it. I have no idea how someone got back there. I have a locked gate and my backyard is fenced in all the way around. I called the police again, but like before, they just took the report and left. That night I slept in my car, parked 2 blocks over. I didn't want to be near the house. I didn't want whoever was doing this to know I was still there. Then, one day, it just stopped. No more texts, no figures on the camera, no weird noises outside. The air around the house even felt different. Lighter somehow. I never found out who sent the photos or who left that cross. None of us did. Jordan moved out of state. Rachel stopped hiking altogether. Will deleted every social media account he had. We don't really talk much anymore. I think we're all trying to forget it, like ignoring it will make it go away for good. But I know better. I still think about that tree sometimes, the carvings, the bones, the way it looked like it had been used for years. I don't hike off trail anymore. Hell, I barely leave town. And every now and then, late at night, I'll think I hear a soft knock somewhere in the house. I freeze every time. I never check. I don't want to know. That's the worst part, not knowing what we saw, what we disturbed, or why it followed us. I've learned that some places are forgotten for a reason, and some things, they don't want to stay buried. I grew up in a small town in Nebraska that barely shows up on a map. The kind of place where everyone knows your name and your family's business. I'm 28 now, but what happened when I was 14 still sticks to the back of my mind like something unfinished. Back then, Halloween was the biggest thrill of the year. It wasn't about candy anymore. It was about messing with old Mr. Delvin. He lived in the weathered brick house at the edge of our road, right before the cornfields swallowed the pavement. He was in his 70s, always wore these high-waisted slacks with mustard stains on his undershirt, and hated kids. Especially me and my brother, Nate. Every Halloween, it became a tradition, us versus Delvin. In 5th grade, we threw toilet paper all over his porch. 6th grade, we put a fake snake in his mailbox. By 8th grade, we were planting fake severed arms in his yard, lighting stink bombs under his windows, and Nate even rigged up a speaker to scream randomly from the bushes. Every time, Delvin would storm out with his flashlight, waving it like a sword, yelling threats in his croaky voice. But nothing ever came of it. He never called our parents or the cops, just muttered something about paybacks coming. We figured he was just all bark. That year, Halloween fell on a Saturday. It was unusually warm, which made it perfect for staying out late. Nate and I had planned our grand finale of pranks for weeks. But when we walked past Delvin's place at sunset, we noticed something weird. His house was decorated, like, actually decorated. Paper skeletons taped to the windows, an inflatable pumpkin in the yard, flickering lights on the porch. It looked cheap, like someone had just bought a Halloween kit and thrown it all together. But that was the thing. Delvin had never put out decorations. Ever. Nate nudged me and said, "He's trying to show us up. We can't let that slide." We waited until 10:30 p.m. In when most trick-or-treaters were gone and the streets were quiet, Nate had brought a bag full of gear. Nothing dangerous, just his usual chaos. Smoke bombs, a motion-activated sound box, and a plastic baby doll painted with fake blood. We crept up through the back of Delvin's property, staying low behind the row of bushes that bordered his yard. Everything was dark now, except for the faint orange glow from the porch, but there was no sound, no TV, no rustling. Not even the usual radio static he always had playing. It felt staged. I remember whispering, "This feels off," and Nate just grinned, tossing me the sound box and saying, "That's the point, let's mess it up." We didn't know he was the one messing with us. We split up like always. Nate went around toward the shed near the back fence while I stayed closer to the house. I was trying to find a good spot to hide the sound box when I noticed something odd. The inflatable pumpkin on the porch was slowly deflating, like someone had stabbed it. But there was no one there. I figured maybe it had a slow leak. Still, it made the whole scene feel wrong. I ducked behind a bush, watching for Nate's flashlight flicker. That's when I heard the shed door creak open, followed by a loud clang like something heavy slamming shut. Then, nothing. Silence. No footsteps. No Nate. I waited a full minute, then another. I whispered his name, but there was no answer. I got up and crept toward the shed. It looked normal from the outside, old and rotted at the bottom like most things on Delvin's property. But now, the padlock on the door was snapped shut. Nate didn't have keys. I tapped on the door softly. "Nate?" I whispered. Nothing. I knocked harder. Still silence. That's when I noticed the camera. A small, battery-powered trail cam mounted high on the corner of the shed, blinking red. and right underneath it, nailed to the wood, was a piece of cardboard that read, "Tricked." That's when it hit me. This was the prank. On us. Delvin had flipped the script. My stomach dropped and I swear I could feel my skin buzzing. I backed away, scanning the yard, half expecting him to come barreling out from the shadows. But there was no one. Just silence. A silence that didn't feel empty, but watchful. I pulled on the shed lock. It wouldn't budge. I even tried hitting it with a rock, but it just clanked uselessly. From inside, I thought I heard something. Faint shuffling, maybe a muffled voice like Nate was gagged or trying to move. That's when panic really set in. I ran back to the road. I remember standing there, frozen under the street lamp, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I had two options. Go for help, which meant waking up my parents or possibly getting the cops involved, and admitting we were the ones who'd been harassing Delvin for years. Or I could go back and try to break him out myself before sunrise. I stared at that dark house, then back at the road. No cars, no lights, just me, the cold breeze, and a growing sense that we were in way deeper than we'd ever meant to be. I decided I couldn't just leave him. I ran back, heart racing, and checked every window and door of Delvin's house, praying something would be unlocked. Nothing. The windows were sealed shut, the front door bolted. I was sweating despite the chill, my hands shaking. Finally, I circled around again and found a narrow window near the basement that looked weak, like the wood was rotting. I jammed the edge of Nate's screwdriver, thankfully still in the prank bag, between the frame and pride until it cracked open just enough to squeeze through. The second I dropped inside, I regretted it. The air was thick, stale, and reeked of mildew and something metallic. The basement was cluttered with piles of old tools, stacked furniture, and a dozen dusty Halloween decorations, props, masks, fake limbs, some still wrapped in plastic. It was like Delvin had been stockpiling Halloween for years. I tiptoed up the stairs, holding my breath, careful not to make them creak. I made it to the kitchen. No lights. But someone had left a flashlight on the table, still warm when I picked it up. That told me Delvin had just been there. I crossed the house quickly and unlocked the back door. Then I ran to the shed, used the same screwdriver to wedge open the hinge bolts from the outside. Took longer than I wanted, but finally, it opened. Nate was sitting on the floor, pale, knees pulled to his chest. The inside of the shed wasn't empty. There were photos. Dozens of them pinned to the wall, photos of us going back years, dressed up on Halloween, walking past his house, even pictures taken through our bedroom window. Nate had duct tape on his wrists, but Delvin hadn't hurt him. He'd just locked him in there with all those pictures, left him alone in the dark. The message was clear. I've been watching. I let it build. This is your punishment. We didn't say anything. We just ran. After that night, we never touched Delvin's yard again. He never spoke to us, never called the cops, and never mentioned it, not once. But every Halloween after, he put out the same cheap decorations, and we knew it wasn't for the holiday. It was a reminder, a trap we'd fallen into once, and just maybe a warning that he was still paying attention. I still drive past that house when I visit home, and every time I do, I feel it. That same buzz in my skin, that same question, what would have happened if I hadn't come back for Nate? I've never posted anything like this before, but after what happened last year, I just need to get it out. Maybe someone's been through something similar. I'm 20 now, but this all happened when I was 18, senior year of high school. I live in a small town in Illinois where everyone kind of knows everyone, and nothing stays secret for long. That's part of what made all of this so much worse. I was dating someone new at the time. Her name was Brooke, and things were honestly going great. But then I reconnected with someone from my past, a girl named Megan, who I hadn't talked to since middle school. Megan and I used to date back in 7th grade, if you can even call it that. We'd hold hands during lunch and text nonstop after school. Nothing serious, we were kids. But she reached out to me on Instagram one night out of nowhere. She said she saw one of my posts and just wanted to say hi. It started casual. We exchanged a few messages, laughed about old times, and I told her I was dating someone. She didn't seem to care, just said she was happy for me, and that she'd love to catch up sometime. I figured it was innocent. I mean, we were kids back then and I didn't think she still had feelings. At first, it really did feel harmless. We texted here and there, nothing flirty, just catching up on life. She had moved to a nearby town about 30 minutes away, was working part-time, and sounded like she had her life together. But over time, the messages started coming more often, then longer, then at weird hours, like 2 or 3 a.m. I didn't reply to those, obviously, but I'd wake up to paragraphs about how she missed the way we used to talk, how she never got over me, and how seeing me with Brooke made her feel physically sick. That was the moment I knew something was off. I showed Brooke the messages. She laughed it off at first, but deep down I could tell it bothered her. Things escalated fast after that. Megan started showing up in places she had no reason to be. One Saturday, Brooke and I went to this little diner we always go to, and Megan just happened to be there, alone, sitting in a booth across from ours, pretending not to notice us. She didn't order anything. She just sat there, staring. I tried to ignore it, but Brooke was shaken. Later that week, Brooke started getting weird DMs from a burner account. No profile picture, no name, just nasty messages saying stuff like, "He'll leave you like he left me," or "You're just a placeholder." At first, we thought it was some random troll, but then the account started sending personal photos, stuff I had only ever sent to Megan back when we were kids. That's when it really hit me. Megan must have kept those photos for all those years, stuff from middle school. Embarrassing, dumb things I never thought would resurface. She had edited them to look recent and started leaking them into group chats at school. Not just to Brooke, but to other classmates too. I got messages from people I hadn't talked to in months, some pretending to be concerned, others just gossiping. In a small town like ours, that kind of thing spreads like wildfire. People whisper in hallways, laugh behind your back, and suddenly I wasn't just the guy with a stalker ex. I was that guy from the pics. I felt exposed in a way I can't even describe. It was humiliating. Brooke tried to stay strong through all of it, but I could see the stress wearing her down. She stopped posting on social media, barely talked at school, and eventually asked if we could take a break. I don't blame her. She didn't sign up for any of this. Megan, meanwhile, kept ramping things up. I started noticing her car parked near my house at night, a black Nissan Altima. Once I walked out around 11 p.m. to take the trash and saw it idling across the street with the lights off. It pulled away when I stepped off the porch. Another time, someone knocked on my bedroom window around 2 a.m., but when I looked outside, there was no one there, just that same car parked half a block down. I tried going to my parents, but they didn't really take it seriously. My dad just said, "Girls get emotional, it'll pass," and my mom told me to block her. But it wasn't that simple. She'd just make new accounts, different usernames, same twisted messages. Eventually, I started losing sleep. I'd stay up most nights checking the front window, scrolling through my DMs to see if she'd sent something else. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach dropped. I was scared, man. Not of her hurting me, but of the fact that she seemed capable of anything. Like she had no line anymore, no shame. And nobody else saw it for what it was. The school didn't help much either. When I brought it up to the counselor, they said since it was all online and off campus, there wasn't anything they could really do. That just made it worse. Megan knew no one would stop her. She got bolder. One day I found a note on the windshield of my car in the school parking lot. It was written in red Sharpie. "I see the way you look at her. You never looked at me like that." That's when I started parking off school grounds. I stopped talking to people. I even deleted my social media for a while. But somehow she always found a way to remind me that she was still watching. The last straw was the night she showed up at Brooke's house. Brooke called me crying, saying someone had been knocking nonstop on her bedroom window, and then disappeared when her dad came out with a flashlight. She swore she saw Megan's face in the window just before she ducked. That night, I drove straight over there and called the police from the driveway. They took the report, but without evidence, there wasn't much they could do. Megan denied everything, obviously, and claimed we were harassing her. I don't know how she flipped it like that, but after that, Brooke's parents made her block me too. They didn't want anything to do with the mess anymore. After that night, it just stopped. No more DMs, no more fake accounts, no more parked car. Megan vanished completely from my life like none of it had ever happened. I don't know if someone finally talked to her, or if she just got bored, or if she moved on to someone else. I never found out. But the damage was done. Brooke and I never really got back together. A few classmates still whisper about the Megan thing even now, like it's some inside joke. I just keep my head down. I don't talk about it much offline because people either don't believe me or they think I'm exaggerating. I've checked Megan's Instagram a few times since. Not proud of it, just curious. Last I saw, she got engaged to some guy from another town. Smiling, happy, completely normal-looking life. Part of me wonders if he knows. If she told him anything about how obsessive she got. Or maybe she really did change. Maybe I was just a chapter she lost control of. Either way, I'll never understand how someone I barely dated as a kid could mess up my life so badly years later. It doesn't make sense to me. To this day, I don't know what triggered her to go that far. It's like something snapped and she just fixated on me. Like I owed her something. I still get anxious when I see a black Nissan Altima. I still hesitate to accept follow requests from accounts I don't recognize. It's been almost 2 years now, and I wish I could say I've moved on completely, but I haven't. Sometimes I still wonder if she's watching, if she's waiting for something, or if one day I'll just wake up and it'll all start again out of nowhere, just like it did the first time. I moved to rural Missouri in early spring of last year, hoping for a quieter life after a long and messy divorce. I'd just turned 38, and between the paperwork, the lawyers, and the emotional drain of splitting everything down the middle, I needed out. So I cashed in what I could and bought a modest 2-bedroom house on a couple acres just outside a town called Cassville. It wasn't much, but it had good bones and a huge backyard, which I figured I could fix up over time. I work remotely doing CAD design for construction companies, so I didn't need to be near any big city. The slower pace, the space, and the silence were exactly what I thought I wanted. About 2 weeks after I moved in, I decided to build a privacy fence along the back edge of the property. Nothing fancy, just some pressure-treated posts and horizontal slats, enough to give me some separation from the patch of woods behind the lot. The ground was soft from recent rain, so I figured it'd be an easy job. I borrowed an auger from the guy down the road, a retired mechanic named Bill, and started digging post holes one Saturday morning. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt out there. Birds chirping, coffee in hand, the sound of the auger breaking soil. I hit something in the 4th hole. At first, I thought it was a thick root, so I got down on my knees and dug with a hand trowel, but it wasn't a root. It was bone, long, curved slightly with a clean break on one end. At first I thought it might have been a deer femur or something, until I uncovered what looked very clearly like part of a skull. Not a full one, just the upper portion, but enough to tell it wasn't from any animal I recognized. The soil was packed tight around it, but the way the pieces were clustered made me freeze. It didn't look like one bone. It looked like a buried body. I covered it back up almost immediately and went inside. I wasn't sure what protocol was for something like this, but I figured the sheriff's department would know. I called the non-emergency line, explained what I'd found, and within an hour, Sheriff Dalton himself showed up. Middle-aged guy, clean-shaven, wore his uniform like he'd stepped out of a catalog. He was polite but distant, more like someone checking off a box than someone genuinely curious. I showed him the spot, even pointed out where the bone was, but he didn't seem all that interested. He barely looked at it before saying, "Probably just a cow or a hunting dog. People used to bury animals all over these lots back in the day. I asked if he was going to have it tested or send someone out, and he just shook his head. Wouldn't be the first time someone mistook animal bones for human. Something about the way he dismissed it didn't sit right with me. I mean, I'm no expert, but I've seen my share of animal bones. This was different. Too smooth, too rounded, and the way the pieces were shaped felt unmistakably human. But I didn't push it. He was the sheriff, and I was just the new guy in town. After he left, I sat on my porch for almost an hour, trying to convince myself it really was nothing. Still, I couldn't bring myself to keep digging that day. I packed up the tools and figured I'd wait until the following weekend, just to give myself some mental space. On Monday morning, something strange happened. I was working in the kitchen when I saw a dark SUV pull into my driveway. At first, I thought it was Amazon or someone lost, but it wasn't. It was Sheriff Dalton again, this time out of uniform, wearing jeans and a flannel, holding 2 coffees in a cardboard tray. I opened the door, and he gave me this easy smile, like we were old friends. Said he was in the area, and thought I might want to talk more about the backyard. I invited him in, mostly out of politeness, and he handed me a coffee like it was some kind of peace offering. We sat at my kitchen table, and after a bit of small talk, weather, fishing, local diner specials, he leaned in a little and asked if I'd thought about selling. I blinked, caught off guard. He said something like, "I've always liked this patch of land. Wouldn't mind picking it up myself if you're ever thinking of moving again." I laughed awkwardly and said I'd only just moved in, and he nodded like he expected that. Then he added, "But if you are thinking about it, I could offer cash, off the record. Wouldn't need to go through any of that real estate red tape." His tone was casual, but something in his eyes felt too focused, too rehearsed. The rest of the conversation blurred. I remember feeling this pressure in my chest, like my instincts were screaming at me to not take the offer. When he finally left, I stood at the window and watched him drive away, and that's when I noticed something else. There was dirt on the wheel wells of his SUV. A lot of it. Fresh, like he'd been somewhere off-road recently. I wouldn't have thought twice about it, except that it was the exact same red-tinted mud from my backyard. The kind that sticks like clay and takes days to dry. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house sounded louder. I kept replaying the way the sheriff looked at me, the dirt on his car, the forced friendliness. I finally got up around 2 a.m. and went out with a flashlight to look at the fence line again. I stood over the spot where I'd dug before and just stared at it, half expecting something to be missing. Sure enough, the ground was different. Not by much, just a slight change in the way it was packed, a faint indentation, but it was enough to know someone had been there. I hadn't touched it since Saturday, and I sure as hell hadn't gone out there after the sheriff's visit. So who had? I decided right then I wasn't letting this go. The next morning I called a friend from college, Jason, who worked in Springfield as a forensics tech. I told him just enough to raise concern, but not enough to implicate anyone. He agreed to come by that weekend with some equipment to check the soil and maybe take a sample. I felt better just knowing someone I trusted would be involved, but the relief didn't last long. 2 days before Jason was supposed to arrive, I came home from the grocery store to find my front door slightly open. Nothing was stolen, nothing broken, but my laptop, which had been on the dining table, was gone. And that was the only thing missing. I didn't report it. Honestly, I didn't know who I could trust. If the sheriff really was involved in something, what was I going to do? Call his office and have them send him back out? I felt like I was suddenly in over my head, like I'd stumbled onto something I was never meant to see. That weekend, Jason still came, but by then the hole had been filled in completely. Not by me. The dirt was packed harder than before, and someone had even tossed a few rocks on top, like they wanted to make it look older. Jason took a soil sample anyway, but nothing ever came of it. He said there weren't enough trace elements to determine anything conclusive. Could have been anything, he said, but I could tell he didn't believe that either. A month later, I put the house back on the market. I didn't tell anyone why. I sold it to an older couple who wanted to retire someplace quiet. I still feel guilty sometimes, but I just wanted out. I never heard from Sheriff Dalton again, and I never saw his SUV in the area after I left. I've moved twice since then, and I still don't feel completely at ease. Every time I see a patrol car, I get that tight feeling in my chest again. I don't know what was buried in my backyard or who put it there, but I know it wasn't a cow. And I know for a fact that some people will do a hell of a lot to keep things buried. I moved into that apartment during my second year of college because it was the only place in town I could actually afford without a roommate. It was a small fourplex on the edge of town, tucked behind an abandoned gas station and some empty lots. The rent was cheap and the landlord didn't ask too many questions, which back then felt like a win. My unit was on the second floor, and I was told the apartment above mine had been vacant for over a year. "No one's touched it since the last guy left," the landlord said, like it was supposed to reassure me. Honestly, I didn't think much about it. I just wanted somewhere quiet to focus on school. At first, it really was quiet. The walls were thin, yeah, but since no one lived upstairs, I didn't have to worry about late-night stomping or loud music. That's why the first time I heard footsteps above me, I was confused more than anything. It was close to 2 a.m., and I was up late cramming for a bio exam when I heard slow, deliberate steps crossing the ceiling. I remember actually pausing my music to make sure I wasn't imagining it, but the steps kept going, just a few, then silence, like someone pacing or shifting their weight. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same kind of sound. I even knocked on the ceiling with a broom handle like an idiot, hoping maybe someone was squatting up there and would knock back or something. Nothing. I texted the landlord the next day and he just replied with, "Still vacant, probably pipes," which didn't make sense because I knew what pipes sounded like. This was different. He didn't seem concerned though, so I let it go, at least for a few days. But once I noticed it was happening more often, always past midnight, always the same uneven pacing, I started to feel weird. Like the air in my place changed whenever the noise started. Heavier. It wasn't just the noise. I started waking up with this weird feeling that someone was watching me. I don't even know how to describe it exactly. I'd just snap awake, heart pounding, completely sure I wasn't alone. I'd check my apartment every time. Doors locked, windows shut, no signs of a break-in. But that feeling, it wouldn't go away. One night, after hearing what sounded like something drop upstairs, something heavy, I grabbed a flashlight and decided to check out the stairwell door that led to the top unit. I hadn't looked at it since I moved in. It was supposed to be locked up tight, but when I got there, the doorknob was just hanging loose, and the frame around the lock was splintered like someone had kicked it in. I stood there for a minute, just staring at the door. My first instinct was to go back inside, lock everything, and pretend I never saw it. But curiosity got the better of me. I nudged the door open with my foot. It made this awful creaking sound, like it hadn't been touched in years. The stairwell was pitch black and smelled like dust and mildew. I remember shining my flashlight up the steps, and the beam caught something odd right away, what looked like scuff marks on the walls, as if someone had been dragging their hands or maybe something else along them. I started going up slowly, step by step, trying not to breathe too loud. The top door was already cracked open, not wide, but enough that I could see part of the floor beyond it. I pushed it gently, and it swung inward with this low, dragging noise. The place was completely dark, no electricity, no furniture, except for one thing: an old, torn-up mattress lying in the center of the floor, directly above where my bedroom would be. I stepped in just far enough to shine the light on it. That's when I saw the stains. Dark, reddish-brown blotches soaked deep into the fabric, like they'd been there a long time. My stomach turned instantly. It wasn't just dirty. It looked like blood, a lot of it. I didn't want to look any closer. I backed out of there fast, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I practically ran back to my apartment, slammed the door, locked every bolt, and pushed a chair under the doorknob. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in my living room with the lights on, just listening. At around 3:30 a.m., the footsteps started again. But this time, they didn't stop at pacing. I swear to God I heard something drag across the ceiling like fabric or a limb, and then 3 loud thuds directly above me, like someone had dropped to their knees on the floor. The worst part? The sound didn't echo like it was coming from a hollow, empty room. It sounded dense, close, like whoever was up there was barely separated from me. I wanted to call the police, but I kept hesitating. What would I even say? Hey, I broke into the upstairs apartment and found a bloody mattress, and now I think someone's walking around up there. I felt crazy. I felt trapped. And when I finally worked up the courage to go back up the next morning with my phone ready to record everything, the door was shut again. The lock was completely fixed, like nothing had ever happened. I know what I saw. I even have a picture on my phone of the door frame cracked and the knob hanging off. But when I showed it to the landlord that same day, he just looked at me like I was messing with him. Said the door had been reinforced months ago. No way it could have broken like that. When I asked if someone had been in there recently, he shrugged and said he didn't have keys for that unit anymore. Nobody's supposed to be in there, he repeated, and then told me I was probably stressed out from school and should try getting more sleep. I left his office feeling more alone and freaked out than ever. That night, I slept on the couch with every light on again. Nothing happened. No footsteps, no dragging. Silence. Same thing the night after. It was almost like whatever had been going on just stopped. But the quiet wasn't comforting. It felt worse somehow, like something was waiting. I started avoiding my apartment as much as I could, staying late at the library, crashing at a friend's place when possible. I didn't want to be there, not alone. The feeling of being watched never really left, even during the day. I'd catch shadows moving out of the corner of my eye. I stopped sleeping properly, stopped focusing in class. 2 weeks later, I came back from a weekend out of town to grab more clothes. Everything in my place looked normal, until I went into my bedroom. Right above my bed, in the exact spot I used to hear the noises, there were 3 perfect dents in the ceiling drywall. Small, circular, spaced like knees would be if someone had dropped down hard. I stared at them for a long time. They hadn't been there when I left. I didn't even unpack. I left that night and never slept there again. Ended my lease early and never looked back. I didn't tell anyone else about it. Who would believe me? It's been over a year since then, and I still think about that place all the time. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone was squatting up there. Maybe I imagined half of it. But none of it adds up. The broken lock that was suddenly fixed, the bloody mattress, the dents in the ceiling, the silence that felt too intentional, and that horrible, heavy feeling that someone was always just right above me. I don't know what was in that apartment. I don't want to know. All I can say is something was wrong with that place, and whatever it was, it knew I was there. I'm not really sure why I'm posting this. I guess part of me still needs someone to tell me I didn't imagine it, that what happened at that cabin was real, and I'm not just losing my mind. This all went down in late September last year. I had just finalized my divorce a few weeks prior, and honestly, I just wanted to be somewhere quiet. No traffic, no emails, no awkward friends trying to check in on me. I found this listing for a hunting cabin in Montana, way off-grid. No neighbors, no cell service, no distractions. It was perfect. The photos showed a 1-bedroom place tucked between trees, with a small porch and a fireplace. I booked it for 2 weeks, packed my truck, and drove out there without really telling anyone where I was going. I just needed the silence. The first few days were exactly what I wanted. It got cold at night, but the firewood was stocked, and I spent my time cooking, reading, and hiking around the area. There was a trail behind the cabin that led down to a small stream. and I'd go there with a thermos of coffee in the mornings. It was peaceful in that kind of way that feels rare when you've been living in cities your whole life. But around day 4, little things started to feel off. Nothing dramatic at first, just things like my bag of trail mix being lighter than I remembered, or a cold draft at night even though I swore I'd locked the door. I chalked it up to being in my own head. I mean, I was alone and going through a lot emotionally, so maybe I just wasn't tracking things properly. But then I noticed the muddy footprints, not inside the cabin but on the porch. They looked fresh too, like someone had stepped there recently. It hadn't rained in a couple of days, but the ground out back near the stream was still damp, and the prints looked like they came from someone circling the cabin, not just passing through. I stared at them for a while, trying to come up with some explanation that didn't involve another person. Maybe an animal, but they were clearly boot prints. Human. That night I barely slept. I kept hearing these random creaks on the roof, almost like someone walking up there real slow. The wind would pick up now and then, and I kept telling myself it was branches shifting or an animal looking for warmth, but it didn't sound like that. The next morning, I found something that made my stomach drop. One of the cans I'd left in the kitchen, some chili I hadn't touched yet, was gone. Not misplaced, not moved, just straight up gone. I know it sounds small, but when you're completely alone in the woods and something disappears from inside your cabin, it hits different. I searched everywhere just in case I was being forgetful, but it wasn't there. That was the moment it clicked for me. Someone had to be getting in. I locked the door every night. I started double-checking the windows too. But this person, whoever it was, wasn't just passing through. They were watching, waiting. That day I drove into the nearest town, about 40 minutes out, to buy a cheap trail camera. I told myself it was just to catch some wildlife on tape, maybe a bear or raccoon that was snooping around. But deep down, I knew I was hoping to catch something else. I got back before dark and installed the camera, tucking it into the trees facing the cabin, angled just right to catch anything or anyone approaching from the back trail. That night, I didn't light the fireplace. I sat in the dark with a blanket and my flashlight, listening. The sounds on the roof came back, but quieter this time, like they knew I was awake. There was also something else, this soft rustling, like leaves being disturbed, but not by the wind. I didn't sleep at all. When the sun came up, I practically ran outside to grab the camera. I was shaking trying to get the SD card into my laptop. Most of the clips were normal, some squirrels, a deer passing by, nothing unusual. But around 2:47 a.m., there was one clip that made my heart drop. A man. Standing in the tree line, just standing there, completely still, facing the cabin. He was wearing a dark hoodie and I couldn't make out his face. He didn't move. He didn't come closer. He just stood there for nearly 5 minutes, watching. Then the footage cuts. I watched it over and over, hoping it was some trick of the light or an illusion. But it wasn't. Someone had been out there, just watching me. After that, I wanted to leave, but something made me hesitate. Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe I didn't want to admit that I was scared. I started locking the bedroom door from the inside, keeping a knife on the nightstand. I even placed little markers near the door, like small sticks leaned up in a pattern, just to see if anyone moved them. And they did. The next morning, one of the sticks was gone. The second can of chili was gone too. And the worst part? There was a smear of mud on the inside handle of the front door. That means whoever it was had been inside, while I was sleeping. That was the moment I started to feel sick to my stomach. I packed that day. I didn't even care about getting my deposit back. I shoved everything into the truck, locked the cabin, and left. But before I did, I checked the camera one last time. The last clip it recorded, just before sunrise, was of the same man, closer this time. He was maybe 20 feet from the cabin, standing at the edge of the trees. Same hoodie, same stillness. Only this time, he was holding something. I don't know what it was, some kind of tool or stick or I don't know. But he was gripping it like he was ready to use it, and he was staring directly at the lens, I drove straight back to Missoula, didn't even stop for gas until the tank light came on. I kept checking the rearview mirror like I expected to see someone following me. I don't know why, but I didn't go to the police. I think part of me felt stupid, like they'd never take it seriously. Nothing was technically stolen besides some food, and I didn't have a clear face shot of the guy. Plus, what could I even say? A man stood in the woods watching me every night. I'd sound insane. I sent the cabin owner an email telling him the place felt unsafe, but I didn't go into detail. I didn't want him thinking I was unstable or trying to cause trouble. I just wanted to forget it. But I couldn't. For weeks after, I kept waking up at 2:47 a.m., no matter how tired I was. Sometimes I'd have nightmares that I was still there, stuck in that cabin with the man standing at the window just watching. I moved apartments, changed my locks, even got a dog. But that feeling of being observed never really went away. The idea that someone could be so close, so quiet, and so patient, it still messes with me. That level of calm creeps me out more than anything. He wasn't trying to break in. He was just waiting. For what? I don't know. And I really don't want to know. I've told a couple friends about it, but I always leave out parts. I never show them the footage. It just feels wrong, like giving that guy more power somehow. I don't even know if he lived nearby or if he just saw me arrive and decided I'd be interesting to follow. The weirdest thing is how it all just stopped. After I left, there were no more signs, no more weird sounds, no strange people around my new place. It's like whatever that was, it belonged to that cabin. Or maybe to that piece of land. I'll never rent anything that isolated again. Lesson learned. Anyway, that's what happened. I don't have some crazy twist or a satisfying answer. I still think about it more than I should, and sometimes I wonder if he's done it to someone else since then. Or if maybe I was the only one who ever noticed. Either way, I'm done with cabins, done with isolation. And if you're reading this and thinking about booking some remote getaway to clear your head, just make sure you're the only one out there. I'm 32 now, but this happened when I was 25, right after I had moved back to Arkansas to help my dad after his stroke. I had just quit my job in Nashville and was trying to adjust to life in a much quieter, slower place. Most of my days were spent running errands, helping with his meds and driving around to pick things up. I wasn't thrilled to be back in the small town I'd tried so hard to leave, but family is family. That night, I was coming back from a friend's place about an hour out from my dad's house. I had taken a longer, older route through the hills to avoid construction on the main road. That back road, Hickory Creek Road, is one I knew well, or at least I thought I did. It was close to 11 p.m. The sky was pitch black, no streetlights out there, just stars and trees closing in on the narrow two-lane road. My phone had no signal, which didn't bother me much at first. I was used to dead zones in that area. I had the windows cracked open and was listening to an old playlist when I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. No big deal at first. But then the truck behind me started speeding up, got closer, then felt comfortable. I could tell it was an older pickup, maybe late 80s, early 90s by the boxy shape and the way its headlights shook when it hit bumps. It started flashing its high beams at me in short bursts. I thought maybe my taillights were out or something, so I tapped my brakes to signal back. But the flashing didn't stop. In fact, it got more aggressive, longer bursts, one after the other. The truck didn't try to pass me either, even when the road opened up a bit. I was going 5 over the limit just to keep distance, but it stayed right on me, never falling back. There was something about the way it moved. It didn't swerve or hesitate like a distracted driver. It felt intentional, like whoever was driving had nothing better to do than tail me. After about 15 minutes of this, my nerves were shot. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I was too far from home to just turn around, and I didn't want to pull over in the dark middle of nowhere. That's when I saw the glowing green lights of a gas station up ahead, one I'd stopped at maybe once before. It was an old rundown Shell station that usually closed around 10, but I didn't care. I just needed to get somewhere with lights, with people, even if only on camera. As I pulled in, I glanced in the mirror. The truck that had been behind me for miles wasn't there anymore. At first, I figured maybe he turned off somewhere and I didn't notice, but that didn't make sense. There hadn't been any side roads for at least 2 miles. I pulled up to one of the pumps, still half expecting to see headlights swing into the lot behind me. But nothing. Just silence. The place was closed, of course. Lights were on inside, but the door had a chain and the sign said back at 6 a.m. Still, the overhead lights by the pumps were bright enough that I felt a tiny bit safer. I got out, trying to act normal, pretending to check my tires just to calm my nerves. Every few seconds I looked back at the road, waiting for that truck to reappear. I ended up sitting in my car for a few more minutes, engine running, doors locked. My heartbeat had slowed down a bit, but I still couldn't shake that crawling feeling on the back of my neck, like I was being watched but from nowhere in particular. I finally decided to just drive home. As I was pulling out, I noticed something strange. On the side of the lot just outside the glow of the pump lights, there were fresh tire tracks, deep ones, like someone had pulled in, idled for a bit, then turned around and left. I got out of the car and followed them with my eyes. They led back to the highway, the same direction I had just come from. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying it over and over in my head, trying to rationalize it. Maybe the guy was drunk and confused. Maybe he thought I was someone else. But then something kept bothering me. The next morning, I couldn't let it go. I called the gas station and asked if they had security cameras. The guy on the phone, his name was Marcus, I think, said yeah, they had footage. And when I explained what happened, he offered to check. I drove back there around noon, still shaken but needing answers. When I walked in, Marcus looked confused. He told me something that made my stomach drop. He said the camera by the pumps showed my car pulling in at exactly 11:08 p.m. But here's the part that doesn't make sense. 5 minutes earlier, at 11:03, that same old truck had already pulled in. Same shape, same lights, even the flickering left headlamp I remembered. It idled at the edge of the lot for a full 2 minutes, then backed out and drove away. There was no footage of it ever following me. According to the cameras, it was gone before I ever got there. I asked Marcus if he was sure, if there was maybe a gap in the footage or a blind spot. He rewound it again, played it back frame by frame. My car pulls in, empty road behind me. No truck, no headlights, just me. I felt sick to my stomach. That truck was inches from my bumper the whole way there, flashing lights like crazy. I saw it. I felt it. There was no way I imagined that. And yet somehow, it had been there before me. I stood in that gas station lobby with a pit in my chest, trying to make sense of it. Marcus just kind of shrugged and said, "This isn't the first time someone's asked me to check footage like this." That line stuck with me more than anything else. The way he said it, like this wasn't rare, like that truck had followed others too. I pressed him, but he didn't say much else. Just that sometimes people stop in and ask about weird trucks or figures in the lot, and sometimes the cameras show things that don't line up. He said most people just leave and don't come back. I guess I'm one of them now. I thanked him and got in my car, and before I pulled out, I looked around the lot one more time. No tire tracks this time, no flickering headlight in the trees, but I still felt like something was out there, watching. I've taken that same road maybe 3 times since then, always during the day and never alone, but I never saw that truck again. Still, to this day, I can't explain it. How it could have been behind me, riding my bumper for miles, and then be at the station before I even arrived. No license plates, no driver ever seen, no record of it behind me. I know what I experienced. I felt it. The pressure, the fear, the way the lights blinded me through the rearview mirror like someone trying to warn me or intimidate me. I just don't know which. I've told this story a few times over the years, but I usually leave out the security footage part. People already give me weird looks when I tell them the truck disappeared. But sometimes I go back to that night and think, What if the truck wasn't trying to hurt me? What if it was trying to stop me from getting somewhere? Or maybe, what if it was trying to get there first? I don't have answers, just memories, and the kind of fear that doesn't go away with time. Just thought I'd share in case someone else out there's seen it too. An old pickup, no plates, always flashing its brights.